guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very nice and I'm sending a lot of hugs and positivity to all of you. Hi, if you're new, welcome to the channel. I really hope you enjoy the content, and if you do, please do consider subscribing. The most exciting video of the month is here. I am excited because April has been one of the most beautiful reading months of my entire life. I have read books that have made me feel things like emotions, intense emotions. I have a total of 15 books to talk about that I read in the month of April. Let's talk about all the books that I read in April and some amazing fresh recommendations for you guys. Let's talk about one non-fiction book first, and that is The Spotted Zebra by Uma Rudd Chia. This is basically the stories and snippets from the author's life and what she has learned by being very different in her own surrounding, how she was very embarrassed about it and how she felt like she does not fit in. As she moves on, she embraces the kind of person she is, every single part of her own self, and we see how that makes her feel and how that changes her life. If you have the courage to stick out, if you have the courage to not try to fit into a group, that is one of the bravest things you can do, and it is one of the most difficult things to do ever. It takes years and years of practice to be at a point where you embrace yourself for who you are completely. This book, while it does help you to understand how embracing yourself will change your life, it is more of a book that gives you the courage to be able to embrace who you are. And I rarely read books that are this vulnerable, that are this honest, that are this candid, that will give you the courage. You do know that there are people in the world like this author who have felt like they don't fit in and they have felt embarrassed about it, but at the end of the day they have embraced themselves. They did get the courage and that changed their life for the better. Knowing that people like this exist in the world just gives me so much comfort and inspires me to accept who I am, no matter what that means, which is why I enjoyed this book thoroughly. Please make sure you're reading the trigger warnings because the author gets really vulnerable. I felt like burying my head in the book so that I could talk to the author and give her a hug. I'm so happy that she wrote this book because as difficult as it may have been for her to write it, she is going to inspire so many people and give courage to so many people. I really wish I can do that for someone someday, and that is sort of like the goal of my life. So this book was actually really inspiring. Now let's begin with the fiction books, the roller coaster ride that has made me go crazy. I started a romance binge at the end of March, which continued in April. So the first few books I read were all romances. First book I read was It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I made a video on the books that you can read for your own romance binge. You can go and check it out, and when you see that, you will see, or even now I'm going to tell you how much I have been swooning over this book. This is like an opposites attract small town romance story. It's a story of Piper and Brendan. Piper she's a social media influencer and she's just been living her life and she barely cares about the consequences of her actions because she's not brought up to care about the consequences because of how rich she is and how she can do whatever she wants. But one day she crosses a line, and so her stepfather sends her to the city of her actual father where her father died, which is the small town. And over there we have Brendan, who is this really grumpy, strict, a person who values things in his life kind of a person. Piper and Brendan could not be more opposite from each other, and they do not start off at the best note, but you go ahead to see what happens between them and how they fall in love with each other. I was blushing so hard reading this book. It is definitely one of my most favorite books ever. Tessa Bailey is so good at writing books like these, especially because Brendan the captain is grumpy. I love it when the guy is grumpy, and the little things that he has done here and there, I was like, oh my god, did he just do that? It was just amazing. It is a spicy book, not meant for teenagers, but it is very beginner friendly, so you can read it if you're an adult. I can sort of predict the kind of vibe that I will get from a Tessa Bailey book, and that vibe is just wild and crazy and warm and romantic and spicy and amazing. I gave this book 4 stars. Next, I read Better Than the Movies in My Romance Binge by Lynn Painter, another book that swayed me off. This one is the story of Liz, who has recently lost her mother and she is trying to stay connected to her mother as much as possible, and one of the ways in which she does it is through rom-com movies. At the same time, Michael, who is her childhood crush, comes to her school, and all of this feels like fate, and now Liz is like, oh my god, I have to get together with Michael because this is clearly fate and it is clearly meant to be, because that is what she has watched in rom-com movies. It is such a comforting read. It is YA and I love young adult romance, and so many parts of it I was just like keeping the book and I was like, oh, it's cute. If you do not like movies and popular songs, then you will not enjoy the book that much, because it is meant for like rom-com lovers, because the main character itself likes rom-com movies so much. It's kind of like her personality trait, and you cannot separate it from the character. So if you don't like cheesiness and stuff like that, you will not enjoy the book. But if you do, this is literally the fluffiest, warmest read ever. No toxicity, no negativity, no tears of heartbreak or anything. It is a beautiful, amazing read. I gave it 5 stars. After that, I started reading The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I actually dropped it. So I actually read more books before this, but now that I already have it in my hand, I'm just gonna tell you what I thought about the book. This is the story of Achilles and Patroclus. It is the retelling of Iliad by Homer, which is the story of the Trojan War in Greek mythology. But this one is more focused on the love story of Achilles and Patroclus, because Achilles and Patroclus are said to be best friends and companions, but Madeline Miller thinks that they were so much more than that, and their love was not celebrated enough. So she wrote this book, and I am just so grateful for the day when she decided that, oh, I am going to go ahead and write this book, because I want this to come forth in the world, because she made my life. I have never read anything more beautiful than this. The writing style is beautiful. I was swimming in the book when I was reading it. I don't know what to say whenever I think about this book because of how I have felt. I also annotated this book, and it was a full-on experience. I also have the vlog for it. You can go and check it out. I have cried so much reading this book. I dropped it the first time because this is the first book I have read in the Greek mythology, and I barely knew anything, but after that I did a little bit of research, and then it was extremely easy to read. Next we have Begin Again by Emma Lord, which was part of the romance binge. I dropped that and I started reading this book. This is the story of Andy Rose, who again lost her mother, but now she wants to again stay connected to her mother, and she wants to walk in her footsteps, and so she goes to the same school that her mother went in to continue the legacy. Also, her boyfriend is in the same school, so she wants to be with him because long distance is not working out between both of them. But once she goes to the school, she comes to know that her boyfriend is not there only, and she's not able to fit into the school. So now what is going to happen to creating her legacy, following her mother in her footsteps? And what about her relationship along the way? She also meets other people, one of them being Milo, and you see what happens with all of these characters and with Andy. I read it in the romance binge, and yes, it can be called a romance book, but the romance was like really subtle, which I did not mind at all after having read so much of romance in the past few days. The entire philosophy of Begin Again was super inspiring, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I forgot to tell you, I gave Song of Achilles 1 million stars, and I gave Begin Again 4.5 stars. The last book I read in my romance binge was The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. This is the story of Gwen and Wells, who have started on a not so good note, but something happens because of which they have to work together to solve a problem. This one is a super fun, witchy rom-com, and I feel like I ended my entire rom-com binge on the best note ever with this. This was such a new, fresh read for me because I have not read any book which is a mix of magic and romance. It was also funny. It also had a little bit of thrill in it. It was basically an amazing mix of a lot of genres, of a lot of elements, and I had so much fun reading it. I am going to read The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling after this because of how much I enjoyed the book, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. I read Song of Achilles after that, and as soon as I finished Song of Achilles, I knew that the next book that I'm going to pick up is Circe by Madeline Miller. I feel like the most blessed person in the entire world to have owned both of these books, because if I read Song of Achilles by her and I did not have this book already, I would be dying to get it. This is the story of Circe, who is a goddess, who is a witch, and she has been banished. She has also not been brought up in the best way. Everybody has made fun of her. She has been tortured. She's basically an outcast in her own family, and that is how she has felt since she was a child. This one is more like the journal of Circe and the adventures of Circe, though adventure is like a weird word because adventures means that they were positive experiences, but they were not all positive experiences. Everything that Circe has to go through is the most heart-wrenching things ever, but seeing the character of Circe, the way she handles everything, her emotions, her mind, the way she lives, all of that was so beautiful to read, especially in Madeline Miller's writing. Now, the writing style in this book, as beautiful as it is, was very different from the Song Song of Achilles. And so this one is a slow read, but I was able to finish it very quickly because I devoured this book also because of the writing style and because you start rooting for the character of Circe since the first page itself. Another amazing book that I gave 1 million stars. After all of the romance and the slow paced books, I wanted to read something completely different because I did not want to put myself in a box about, oh, these are the only books that I am reading, and then get bored with it and then never read it again. And so I picked up Riley Sager's Lock Every Door, which is a thriller. This is the story of a woman who has lost everything in her life, her boyfriend, her job, everything. She has no money at all and she feels stuck. So when she gets the option of house sitting a house, she takes it up without a second thought, even though it looks shady. But once she goes to that house, she comes to know that it's not as simple as she thought it would be, and things start going wrong. I did not even have big expectations from the book. I am telling you, I just wanted a good thriller, but this book was disappointing. The beginning was really good, but I did not like the character of Jules at all from the first page. I mean, she's so dumb that you're seeing things in front of you but you're not ready to just accept it. She was not even listening to her best friend. I'm like, why are you doing that? There were so many instances where I was like, why are you doing that? Being broke and being helpless or feeling stuck, I get all of those things, but stop being dumb. And Jules was really dumb for me, especially for a thriller book. But then I stuck to the book because I was like, it's fine, maybe she has a character arc. And as I went towards the middle of the book, she did have a character arc and I did enjoy her character for some time. But then as I went towards the end of the book, the whole twist and the truth, the revelation was so not good. I was so disappointed. It was so lame. It was really lame. I won't say that the entire book was a disappointment, which is why I gave the book 2 stars, even if I just do not like this book at all, because the writing is really good and it's really creepy. It was really making me feel the creeps, but I do not like the revelation. I do not like the character. I do not like a major chunk of it, and I was very utterly disappointed to have read this book and invested so much of my time in it. I mean, it was just so lame. It was so lame. After that, I had just received this book like 3 or 4 days ago, and I was actually wanting to read this book after reading Circe, but that would be like reading too many complex books at once, and I was pretty sure that I would not be able to sustain it, which is why I took a break with Lock Every Door, though it did not give me the break that I wanted. But then once I was done with it, I was like, okay, fine, my palate has been cleansed anyhow, and I'm just going to read the book. And the book is Olivia Blake's Alone with You in the Ether. This is such a special book. You should check out the haul to understand why. This is the story of Regan and Aldo. Regan is a counterfeit artist, which means she stole some art, and Aldo is a mathematician. He's getting his PhD, I think, and they cross each other's path, and that is it. That is all I can tell you. That is the story. But you guys, I have never ever, like, I have no other idea or words as to how I can express how I have never ever read anything like this in my entire life. Never ever. It has no cheesiness in it whatsoever. What you do get is so many dimensions of the characters of Aldo and Regan, and they are so complex characters, great characters, and the only thing that happens in the book is that they fit with each other. They fit each other like nobody fits with each other in the whole world. But then you also see what happens when two such complex grey minds come together, how they deal with each other, what love does to them individually and what love does to them together. Make sure you're reading the trigger warnings for this book before you read the book. But once you do read the trigger warnings and you're okay with it, you cannot miss out on this book. I read pages, certain paragraphs, and I was staring at the wall. I was not in my own body when I was reading it. Like, I was like, how can you write this? How can you write? How does that happen? Love has never been talked about like this ever before. Like, if there are more books like Alone with You in the Ether, I so desperately want to read them. I will do anything to read them. This was such a experience of a lifetime, and I am so grateful to have read it. I would not recommend it to beginners because it can be a little complicated in the sense that it cannot be your first book. But if you have read a few books before and you like complex books books with complex grey characters, then you are in for a ride. Gave this book 1 million stars. By 1 million stars you get it, right? I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I listened to The Fine Print, which is another romance. What is going on with me? But I listened to it because one, it is like insanely famous and I wanted to see whether it's worth the hype or not. Two, after reading Alone with You in the Ether, I wanted to read something light. Not just that, I was also not in a space to read itself, and so I was listening to it as an audiobook on Storytel. And I feel like there's something about the romance genre that has been attracting me way too much since the past 2 months, 1.5 months. This is a story of a billionaire whose grandfather has died and he has given a challenge to his grandson, three grandsons, and they have to complete the challenge if they want to take over the empire. And so he goes to Dreamland, where he becomes the director of Dreamland, where he has to take care of things, and that is where he meets the main female protagonist, and she just works over there, and then they have to work together because she is more talented than anyone knows, and he gives her a chance to actually reveal her talent to him. I started off this book and I gave it 1.5 stars in my head in the first 2 hours because I was like, it is such a typical romance book, but not in a way where I actually enjoy it. But as the book moved forward, I did somehow get connected to the book. I still wasn't connected to the characters, but I did get connected to the story for sure, and I was definitely invested in the drama. So it went from like 1.5 to 2, and then 2.5. I finally came on to 3, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It is definitely a great light-hearted read. It is also spicy, but overall it was an okay, good experience. After that, I started listening only to Dial A for Aunties, but I had to DNF that because after that we had the readathon. Oh no, after The Fine Print, I read The Boy at the Back of the Class by Angelique Roth. I completely forgot that. And then I started listening to Dial A for Aunties. Because I got the break from reading and I listened to an audiobook, it was easy for me to read this book. This is the story of the boy at the back of the class who just recently came, and he does not laugh and he does not smile and he doesn't talk at all. And so the main character of the book, who is 9 years old, is very intrigued as to why the boy at the back of the class does not do anything like this. And then he finds out that the boy at the back of the class, Ahmed, I'm just gonna say his name, Ahmed, is actually a refugee, and he has come after facing a war, and he is not even with his parents right now. So it makes sense to the main character that, oh, that is why he's always quiet, and all the main character wants to do is bring a smile on Ahmed's face. The most adorable book in the whole world, and telling you, you ask my brother the number of times I have cried. I mean, I love being a kid. This definitely was a very nostalgic read when it comes to being a kid, and when you go to school, talking about stationery, talking about detention, talking about getting punished in the school or getting good grades, and all of those things were just so cute. I went back to my own childhood. But apart from that, seeing how a 9-year-old behaves and what a 9-year-old is ready to do for a boy. The 9-year-old did not even know Ahmed, and even then it was just so heartwarming. I sort of wanted to become a child again when I read this book, and that is when I decided that I'm actually going to make sure that I keep my own child's heart alive. It also covers a lot of themes of racism, of what happens in a war, in the most innocent way ever, which again was adorable. I think this book was able to deliver so many messages through the perspective of a 9-year-old in the easiest way ever. So you can read it even if you're a teenager, you can read it even if you are like a 12-year-old, and you must read it if you're an adult. Like, you need to get reminded of what it was like to be a child after reading that. I feel like children teach us so many more better things than adults ever can. After that, we had the readathon, where I read 4 to 6 books. The first book I read was The Phonebox at the Edge of the World. This book is translated from Italian to English, but it is rooted in the Japanese culture, and it is inspired by a true story because the phonebox at the edge of the world is a real thing. Yui has lost her daughter and her mother, and she is dealing with their loss when she comes to know about the phonebox at the edge of the world, where she can go and talk to them. Now, talking to them does not mean that you actually talk to them. They don't talk back to you. It's more about the concept and what the phonebox at the edge of the world represents, and it helps you to deal with the grief and loss. And along with that, she meets many other people who have lost people, and you get to know their story. So it's basically like multiple stories going on. I felt so empty after reading this book. I felt like I came to know another side of being a human being after reading this, what it is like to deal with grief and loss and how people do it. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is not the only way, because the book also talks about how it is unique to every person, but but seeing the stories of everybody that comes to the phone box at the edge of the world, and Yue herself, and how they move on, it was just really nice to read. It was utterly sad. I felt more human after reading it. Next up, I read A Touch of Darkness, which is the first book in the whole series. I have the 3 books of the series, and I read the first one, and I'm currently reading the second one. This is the story of Hades and Persephone. Hades is the god of death. Persephone is the goddess of spring, but she is masquerading as a mortal because she does not have the powers of a goddess, and she by mistake gets into a contract with Hades because Hades has all of these nightclubs. He makes contracts with human beings, and if they lose, he takes their soul, and if they win, they get whatever they want. This is the first book, and I feel like it's the beginning of Hades and Persephone, and I think that a lot more is going to happen in the next 2 books, and I'm hoping that it does. There's so many loose ends in this book. It was not built up properly, and I am thinking that all you needed to know from this book was how Hades and Persephone get together, and I loved that. I loved reading about it. It was a light read, but definitely an enjoyable read. And Hades, oh my god, I love Hades. I love Hades more than Persephone in this book, which is crazy. Like, how does that happen? But yeah, I did enjoy it. I've given this book 3.5 stars, and I'm really hoping that I continue to give the other books more stars than this. Then we have the Heartstopper series. Oh my god, you have to see the readathon video to see my reaction to this. This is a story of 2 boys who meet each other and fall in love. But as you progress with the books, I've read 3. I'm going to buy 1 more, and 2 more are going to come out. So there are like 6 books altogether. You see how they struggle with coming out into the world. You see the stories of other people who are together, but they struggle with judgment from everybody. You see themes of mental health and so many other tender, vulnerable topics talked about in the most warm way ever. It is in a comic book graphic novel style. It literally took me like 20 minutes to finish the first book, and I finished the next 2 in like 1.5 hours. So it's definitely very easy to read, and I cried so much reading the book. It was insane. It was an experience of a lifetime. I am so excited to read the 4th book, and I'm insanely excited about the 5th and the 6th book, and nobody can stop me from buying the hardcover of these books. Like, oh my god, it's literally the cutest books in the whole world. Alice Oseman is just amazing. And last but not the least, we have Sue Towson's The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, and it has 1 more book, The Growing Pains of Adrian Mole, but I did not read that. I only read The Secret Diary, and it is basically The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole. Now, Adrian Mole is 3 by 4 years old, and it's basically the journal entries of Adrian. Am I saying Adrian since then? Adrian. And this book is hilarious. His parents are going through some shit, and you get to see what they're going through from Adrian's perspective, and it's funny. It's utterly funny. I also think that so much shit is happening with Adrian, and because Adrian himself is so young, he's not able to understand what is going on, and so it is funny to read, but it's also very complicated and actually sad. You can read this as a light read, but you can also dive deeper into it, and you can see different characters, how they react, and it is sort of like a study of various human beings, and I gave it a 4 star. And with that, we come towards the end of the video because it's like utterly dark, and I'm really sorry about the lighting going from this to this, but I really hope you got at least 1 recommendation out of all of this. It was such an amazing month, oh my god. And that is the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again very soon. Bye.